All right, we're back. NBA talk. It's a great time of year to be an NBA fan. Trade deadline just passed, and man, did a lot happen. So, got Jared back on here. Good to have you, brother.
Thanks for having me. Let's do it.
So, off top, we were just talking about the last podcast we had and how you really wanted to see James Harden go to the Sixers and play with the Embiid, and it finally happened. So, like, initial thoughts. Let's hear it.
Yeah, we spoke in November, and the possibility of Harden getting moved was it wasn't really on the table. The Nets were coming off a pretty good playoff performance, despite sort of crashing out because of injuries. And 3 months later, he's forced himself onto a new team, and my team is lucky enough to have his services. But yeah, yesterday was truly a remarkable day. It's probably the happiest I've been in months. Not just basketball wise, just on a personal level. It was just an amazing day, and couldn't be happier about how much they had to give up, and what the future holds. It kind of I think the future is limitless. So I'll probably be brought back down to earth in a few days. But yeah, right now I'm living the high life.
So the full trade details. James Harden goes to the Sixers. Meanwhile, the Sixers have to give up not just Ben Simmons, but Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, two very underrated pieces of the Sixers' success so far, and then two first-round picks, 2022 this year's, and then in 5 years in 2027. Is that too much for Harden? That seems like a lot.
Kyle, it sounds like you think it's a lot, and I can't wait to discuss it with you. In my humble opinion, it may be an overpay. It might be a slight overpay. Doesn't matter. I don't think it matters at all. And we'll talk about why. But I will say, Daryl Morey's ethos for his entire time in the NBA has been to get superstars, deal with the rest later. And that's exactly what he did. And I would say that he did more than that. He kept a bunch of pieces. Matisse Thybulle was a piece that was sort of on the fringe of being involved or not. He ended up keeping him. And so I think, we can obviously talk about who sort of held the cards in terms of leverage here, but I think it was an awesome trade. You could definitely argue they gave up a little bit, but what are we talking about here? It's James Harden, and obviously we're talking about how much they gave up, obviously, and there's important details, but you get the deal done, and you think it's too much, I'm guessing. Why do you think so?
I think it's too much because the Sixers were already incredibly thin. Their bench unit consisted of, on any given night, Isaiah Joe and Georges Niang and Drummond. And now their backup center is nowhere to be found. It's probably going to be Bassey or something. They really don't have any guard depth at all. They lose a big time shooter, and they lose a little bit of flexibility moving forward. Moving away from the picks or all the pieces they had to give away, let's talk about James Harden. So this man has had quite the last 24 months or so.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes he looks
14 months. It's just 14 months, Kyle. I think it's really just been 14 months. That's an argument against him. I'm actually saying it's happened so quickly.
That's fair. I mean, he looks like he spends all his time at the club eating lemon pepper wings in the off season and throwing ones left and right. He has stretched out this hamstring injury longer than any injury of anyone in the NBA ever. And he's going to have to be signed to a crazy contract once this season's over. If you're Daryl Morey and You have the choke artist himself, James Harden, in the playoffs. You have choke coach of all time in Doc Rivers.
No arguments with the coach there. That's for sure.
So let's say they lose in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Bucks or something. Are you going to give James Harden, as a Sixers fan, put yourself in Morey's shoes, are you going to give him 5 years, 240 for the next, until he's 38 or something?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a concern. I think it's a concern you see a ton. You get a guy like Damian Lillard, let's say, coming off an amazing year last year, and immediately he turns into a guy that you don't want to give a 5-year max to because he's at that age. And so I think we're at that time with a lot of these players. Chris Paul and LeBron James are two examples where it hasn't really happened in terms of the fall off. But I think with a lot of these guys, we get to a point where they're 31, 32, and that next big deal is just going to look bad. And I don't think any team really has the leverage to tell those guys that are 10-time All-Stars, we're not giving you that deal. He's either going to go somewhere else and get the deal. And I think, at times it doesn't work. And in the case of John Wall and Russell Westbrook, those are two guys that they fell off even younger than, let's say a Damian Lillard and a James Harden. But you do get the case of a Chris Paul or a LeBron James, and those are two unique players, but where the contract doesn't look bad. And so, there's a way that the James Harden contract doesn't look bad. He's a guy, while he's been injured all the time and he has a ton of personality concerns, I totally hear all that. There's a chance his game can age okay. His shooting's been really down, but hypothetically, he's a great shooter. He uses, strength that shouldn't go away. So some of these things could last. And just in terms of the personality stuff, it's definitely something to be fearful of. If Joel gets hurt next year, does he just want to leave again? Obviously those are things you have to deal with. But here are my two things. From a Brooklyn perspective, there's a lot of people talking today about, how they got better somehow with this deal, which we can talk about. I'm not sure how that's possible, but all these Brooklyn players saying James was a head case, and you talked about how he's a playoff choker. And I'm here for that. And I love James, and he has choked in the playoffs. If James Harden is a playoff choker, what does Brooklyn think of the guy they got back? If James Harden is a personality head case, what the hell do you think you just got back? And so just from a Brooklyn versus Philly perspective, it's crazy that we're even discussing this as a two-pronged win-win thing here. It's crazy to me that and I get it. We're trying to poke holes in both teams, but just when we compare those two teams, I think it's crazy that we're somehow comparing those two players. In terms of the 5-year deal, like you said, it's scary, but it's all about championship windows. There's going to be a time, and you're a Celtics fan, in 10 years, if you're lucky enough to keep your two superstars, those contracts are going to get bad too. And I just think that's the reality. And what's the alternative, Kyle? I don't know. Sure. I mean, maybe we could have some sustainable, good level starters instead of this guy, but I mean, I'm ready to win the big thing. And if we have to take the pain on the back end, I'm for it. And I want to hear what you have to say about, I guess, the Brooklyn side of things.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points. First one is, I think anyone, if they're in Daryl Morey's shoes, you don't really have a choice. You moved out all this capital for this player, and you're going to let him walk after the season? No, you're going to give him the money. There's only really one choice to do there.
But do you not want to give him the money?
I would argue, you look at the cases of giving older superstars that money, who ages well and who doesn't. I think the person who puts crazy amount of time and energy into their body and into their game will age well. LeBron, Chris Paul. If you have a super skillful talent like Steph Curry and his shooting, I think that will age incredibly well. I don't know, I think James Harden is more in the mold of Westbrook and Wall in terms of he's not going to work any harder than he already does. Granted, I'll give this to you. when he came into Brooklyn, he was getting praised for his leadership. He got his trade out of Houston, and everyone was like, "Wow, James, he talks the
He
game
was
like
awesome.
crazy."
He was awesome for 2 months there. Yeah, he was amazing.
Right, and then whatever happens, he gets comfortable in the relationship, and his true colors start to come out. And man, I just think he does have the skill in terms of his pace of play and his sometimes shooting, but mostly playmaking. Man, I just think it's a lot of money. I think Ben Simmons is on the upswing of his career. Granted, it was never going to happen. But I think this is the best thing the Sixers could have done with Ben Simmons. I think this is the best package they could have got. So if I have to give it a ranking, I'm giving both teams a thumbs up, double thumbs up for me here with these two teams. What would you grade it?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to go on too long, but I mean, there's so many people telling Daryl Morey to just trade him. Just trade him for this, trade him for that. And they didn't just trade him for a top 30 player, the top 30 player. They traded him for a player that's objectively better than him. He's going to be better. If you want to say in 5 years, Ben Simmons will be the better player, maybe. But James Harden in the next 3 years, I think those 3 years will be better than any Ben Simmons years individually in Ben's entire career. And Ben's been amazing. He's been a third-team All-NBA. But the ceiling for this Brooklyn team is just not the same. And I love Ben Simmons. He's one of my favorite players. But they're not on the same caliber of player. So the fact that Daryl waited and got someone of this caliber for a distressed asset that I had so many Celtics fans telling me we wouldn't trade Marcus Smart for him. And you got James Harden, and I know James Harden in 5 years, it's different, but we're not looking at 5 years. We're looking at the next 3 years. And so I couldn't be happier with the trade. The depth, fine. I mean, we got 2 top 15 players. I'm excited about it. And from a Brooklyn perspective, I think if you were to tell, Sean Marks in the Brooklyn front office, gun to your head, you have to trade James Harden. I think what they got is solid. They got some stuff back. But if you told them 3 months ago when they were wiping the floor with the Celtics in the first round, and they had a big three that looked ready to contend for 5 years, that this is what their roster was going to look like. I mean, we don't know what happened, what the inner dynamics were of the team. And a lot of that it goes on Harden. I think it was probably a lot of his fault. But from that point to now, this has been a complete failure from their organization. And I still think they could probably win a championship. They got a good team. But I mean, you just traded James Harden for Ben Simmons. And I love Ben Simmons, but come on, they're not the same player. And I know you're a Celtics fan. And there's just, I don't know, these people who are complaining about Harden and his personality and all this, you're getting it even worse with Ben coming back. And so from a trade standpoint, I would give the Nets probably a thumbs up, but in terms of the way everything was handled, I mean, I think they failed, and they can still win a chip, and maybe they will, but I think it was a thumbs down in terms of how we got here. So that's what I would say. Okay.
I think it makes Philly. If you're a Philly fan, you're excited. You think for the first time since probably Jimmy Butler, you really have a shot because you have that lead ball handler to go with Embiid. And Embiid looks like an MVP. He looks absolutely spectacular. So to get a backcourt guard to run pick and roll, to feed on the ball, you got to be really, really excited. So, all right, let's move along to an older trade. Going back in the past, we got Norman Powell and Rocco go to the Clippers, and the Blazers get a bunch of salary filler and junk, pretty much. Bledsoe, Winslow, Keon Johnson, and the 2025 second. Is there much to say here? Is there not? What do you think about this for each thing?
Yeah, there's some teams in the NBA that I wouldn't call them sleeping giants, but they get looked over one reason or another. The Clippers are that team. I mean,
They are. Absolutely.
total wash of a year. Obviously, their best two players, two guys they gave up their entire draft future for. PG and Kawhi haven't played hardly at all this year, and yet they're competitive as all hell. Well coached, much better coached than the Sixers are. That's for sure. And yeah, they're just kind of getting revamped and ready to go for next year. And it's not really a juicy title because it's just next year, and they probably won't have anything to say for this year. But yeah, they're getting good around the edges here, and I think Kawhi and PG might be ready for another run at it next year. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think it is a sleeping giant. That's a great way to put it. I think Norman Powell is a really good two-way wing to put with Kawhi and PG, and he kind of fills that gap they had between the big wings and then some guards they have Jackson and Kennard, who are the defensive players. So I like that. Rocco, we'll see what happens with him. He's kind of a declining value player, and they got off of some contracts. The Blazers, I don't know what they're doing. They got a second. If you look at what they gave up 2 first-round picks for Covington. They get rid of them for nothing. And they have to give away Powell, who they gave away Trent Jr. for, who's been scoring 30 a game this month for Toronto and looking like a stud of a shooter. I'll give the Clippers a thumbs up and the Blazers a thumbs down on this trade.
Yeah, I agree. I actually have this was before the Harden trade. My dad texted me, what the hell are the Blazers doing? Does this mean something for Dame? And I texted him back that all the reports said they're not rebuilding. They're actually building around Dame. And I think we'll talk about the next deal they made to sort of open things up. And I think it probably makes sense for them to hit the reset button. But certainly after this trade, it was like, what are we doing here? So I'd agree with your thumbs up for the Clips and thumbs down for the Blazers.
So we'll flow right into that. Moving up 1 or 2, we got the Blazers making another move. Again, looks like they're tanking, and it's funny their GM's an interim GM right now, so he's acting like he's got the ship for the next 5 years when he probably won't. So the Pelicans and the Blazers were involved in a deal that the Blazers sent McCollum, Nance Jr., and Tony Snell to the Pelicans, while the Blazers got Josh Hart, Alexander Walker, Sam Ransky, Didi, the dude who got drug suspended, whoever that dude was, and then a first rounder this year and 2 second rounders in the future. If you're a Pelicans fan, do you like this? Is it hope?
Yeah.
How you feeling?
It's interesting. There's been a lot of conversation about David Griffin of the Pelicans sort of pushing in chips a little bit too early. He thought they were ready to contend last year. He had Bledsoe and Steven Adams on the roster. He just had a lot of veterans and probably would have been the right move if Zion stayed healthy. They'd definitely be much better. They're another sleeping giant where they got this potential all NBA guy that just is nowhere to be found. And no one even cares to really talk about him because it's not like they're just so out of the playoff picture maybe that it's not that interesting to talk about, but they're a sleeping giant. You get a veteran guard who's, all-star potential. And I think they're good. They got a solid big 3 next year. There's not a ton of upside with CJ as your lead creator, but I'm optimistic about Brandon Ingram. Maybe they could do some stuff next year. And in terms of what they gave up, I like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I'm not sure, what his contract situation's like. Maybe that they sort of gave him up because he's coming up on a deal, but not too much pain with what they gave up. So I guess they're trying to stay competitive because, everyone's waiting for Zion's rookie deal to be up and waiting to see if he wants to stay or not. So I guess that's what NBA's life is like. When you get a good player, you want to stay competitive so he doesn't leave you.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're a small market, you're pretty much at the whim of whatever they want to do. And Yeah, like you mentioned, I think David Griffin has done an awful job building this roster. You look at the players who left, you look at the players he's retained, and man, they lost some good players. Having Lonzo Ball would be amazing on this roster right now. You'd take him over Devontae Graham every day of the week. And you have him, you lost Drew Holiday. Man, they lost some good talent. And I like CJ though, and I especially like Larry Nance Jr. I think he's going to be a good small ball five alongside Zion that can switch on the perimeter, can guard 1 through 5. And I think he's hurt right now. I think he's going to be out for the year, but he'll be good when Zion comes back. And for the Blazers, they got a first round pick, so that's good. There's not much else to say about it. Josh Hart's cool. He's a good like seventh, eighth role player type of dude. And they already got rid of Nickeil Alexander Walker, so there's not much to say there. He's on the Jazz now. So Blazers blowing it up for sure. I'll give the Pelicans a thumbs up because they did something and got a decent player, and then I'll go thumbs down for the Blazers.
Yeah, I actually like the Blazers breaking up CJ and Dame for once. Clearly that duo wasn't going to do much. So I actually think the Blazers did fine here. I'll give them both an okay grade. What are we calling it? Sideways? Just okay.
Yeah,
I think both.
sure.
I think both did fine. Yeah.
Okay. So the Cavs made a move. They are a fun team to watch. I'll tell you that. They are very, very fun to watch. There's a lot of talent, a lot of different players. They're going untraditional, playing a bunch of versatile bigs out there. Playing some like stretch 4s, stretch 5s at the 3, and they needed some wing scoring with Colin Sexton out and losing Rubio. It can't just be Darius Garland, the only one creating on the perimeter. So they basically give up Rubio, who's out for the year, and a first rounder, which will be in the 20s or something, to the Pacers for LeVert and a second round pick. I think it's exciting as a Cavs fan. Are you a Karis LeVert fan? You higher or lower than him than most? What's your opinion on the Michigan alum?
Yeah, I think they should be reaching a little bit higher in the next several years. Obviously, they have a big three of Mobley, Allen, and Garland that are pretty young. LeVert's probably a little bit older than them, so I don't want to see them mortgage their potential future to get a real second perimeter star next to Garland. Obviously, those two bigs are awesome, but in terms of shot creation, you're going to need someone like legit next to Garland if you're going to really make a run for it the next few years. So I hope they don't mortgage that. I think Karis is on a fine contract in terms of moving him eventually. But sure, I sure do love Darius Garland. It's rare that you get a player that comes in and makes you really want to watch all their games. And for me, that's him in terms of just awesome in pick and roll, just great at setting up his teammates, shoots beautifully from outside. I just love watching him play. So I don't want them to mortgage sort of the salary space to get that second perimeter creator. I don't think Karis is that long term, but they've been so good without him that they might just prove me wrong and make a few deep playoff runs with him. And he could improve, obviously, but yeah, I guess I'm looking to pair Garland up with someone even better in the next few years if I'm a Cavs fan.
I really enjoyed this trade by the Cavs. I think Karis LeVert's in the perfect situation where he's got a lot of backside help defensively where he can rely on. He doesn't have to be a defensive stopper. And he's also in a role where he can get thrown to the sixth man and stagger minutes with Garland, be the lead ball handler with the second unit, and really put up some points, I think, for them that they need from the perimeter. I don't think there's much else to say about it. That Karis LeVert I think he's in a good role in Cleveland. And then the Pacers, I really like Rubio. He tore his ACL, so who knows what to think. They get a first rounder out of it, and it's I think it's weird that the Pacers are rebuilding in their first year with Carlisle. I didn't think Carlisle would go to a situation where they're rebuilding immediately, but I guess that's what can happen when you get a couple injuries. So Cavs, thumbs up. Pacers, thumbs to the side. I wish they got more than Rubio, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the Pacers had a logjam at guard, and they still have it obviously with Halliburton, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So I'd go the same. Pacers on the side, they're doing just fine. And Cavs, yeah, I guess you just got to give them a thumbs up because, yeah, they got something from the Rubio contract.
Right. Now, this next one is very interesting because I watched the Kings play the first night, and they looked really good. I was shocked because everyone hates on the Kings. They can't make the playoffs. Vlade Divac is, biased and can't see, into the future of talent. He just wants to get some old school European big man. So very, very interesting trade. Pacers and Kings. The Kings get Sabonis, Justin Holiday, Jeremy Lamb, second round pick. And then the Pacers, they end up getting Halliburton, very surprising, very high in Halliburton, and then Hield and Thompson. Man, who won this trade? Someone's got to always win,
I think they both got what they want. The Pacers obviously got a potential star, and the Kings have at least a play-in berth over the next 2 or 3 years. They're at least going to get one now, I'd say. I mean, maybe not this year, but I'm got to imagine they'd get one either next year or the following year, and they're going to say that's a playoff berth, and that's great for them. In terms of Halliburton, yeah, I'm not as high as the consensus is, I would say, on him. I think he's obviously a nice player. The shot is consistent, but I just hate the form. And there's something about watching him that makes me question him. I can't deny his production. He's obviously a young guy, and he's done so well so far. So I'm not going to say he's not going to be good, but he's just not my favorite player to watch, I guess you could say.
Did you see him play against the Sixers the other week?
Yeah.
You watched that game. I don't know if you saw the highlights, but he was cooking the Sixers.
Listen, I watch every second of the Sixers. I was going to bring that game up, but I didn't know if you saw it. I hadn't watched them play, obviously. I'm not going to watch the Kings play, but that game definitely opened my eyes to, okay, this guy's a real player. And he was cooking the likes of George Niang and Danny Green, and he was listen, not everyone can do that on switches. Like that is still a skill. I question the ceiling, but in terms of being a top 30, 40 guy, he's clearly already there. I wouldn't have given up on him if I'm the Kings. He's just not my cup of tea, but I'm not going to deny that he's very good, and he's going to become great, most likely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is. You watch him for like 5 seconds, and you think he's some weird role player. How's that shot going in? It's all the way on his shoulder where he's launching it from. I think he's in that Lonzo Ball kind of versatile guard role where he could be the point guard and have average 10 assists, or he could be the shooting guard and average 25, 5, and 5. He's very versatile. I think the Suns should be kicking themselves. They shouldn't be able to sleep for years for not taking this dude at 10 and taking Jalen Smith instead, who we'll mention later on. But he'd be an amazing third guard, Booker and Chris Paul. But watching that Kings team, the new Kings team, I was like, De'Aaron Fox gets his kind of backcourt to himself. He gets all the creation. He's not an off-ball guy. He's not. They get Sabonis, who, man, he is kind of looking like Vlade Divac out there in terms of he can play make. He's going to be a big bruising finisher in the rim. He doesn't have to play next to Miles Turner anymore, which will help. not sure what they're going to do with Rashawn Holmes. He just kind of got thrown to the bench when I think he's above average big man in this league. But in terms of other guys, Justin Holiday, big fan of him, versatile shooter, very good shooter. Jeremy Lamb, kind of similar score defender. The Pacers, it's hard to judge what they're going to do because they might get rid of Buddy Hield. They might buy him out, or who knows what happens with them because it seems like they're in lose now mode. But in terms of grading this, it's a little difficult. Again, I'm not sure who really won.
The double loss situation.
Although
No, I think.
Yeah.
I think the Pacers definitely. I mean, they're going nowhere. They had 4 or 5 really high level starters, but no, I would say superstars. And you know what that gets you? That gets you 7, 8, and 9 seeds every single year. And so I think taking a swing on a younger guy that you're obviously optimistic can be like maybe a 1-2 time All-Star at least. I think it's a nice play for them to try to get out of just mediocrity. So I would give it a plus for the Pacers, and the Kings I would give it a plus too because they just won a damn playoff game. So let's do it.
Right. Yeah, I think some teams they just got to move. They just got to make change for the sake of change. If they're not doing well, just to change it up, to increase the hope that a fan base might have, and that's enough to sell a couple more tickets and get a couple more viewers. So, I can agree to that. I'll give it a plus for both teams as well. The next one I think we're going to skip is the only thing that matters is Alexander Walker going to the Jazz, which I don't know. He seems a little redundant with Clarkson coming off the bench, but I don't know. He'll be interesting to watch there. The next one we'll mention is Dragic, who's been chilling, not playing, goes to the Spurs and is going to get bought out. Who would you like to see Dragic go to after he gets bought out? Where do you think he might be most impactful?
Yeah, I've always been interested in him. Obviously, he was always the 6th man for the Heat, but I think he consistently outplayed their starting point guards almost always. And it was just a thing where Spoelstra loved to have, really high level guys off the bench. Someone just mentioned him as a potential Sixers candidate. And I was thinking if he joined the Sixers, I mean, he would be their 4th best player. I don't know what we're talking about here. This is not like a traditional buyout guy. This is a really, really high level player. And we haven't seen him play in a year or so, but I mean, this guy was tearing it up just 2 years ago in the bubble. He was incredible for the Heat. He played off the bench, but he was consistently like starter level guy, could drop 25 any given night. So he's a high level starter. I think not a high level. He's probably a low level starter, but obviously the rumor has been for him to go to the Mavericks. I haven't thought about, who he would benefit the most. Who do you think would work for him?
Yeah, I think the Mavericks is the obvious answer because of the Slovenian connection and Luka wanting another new ball handler. But I think they got that in a trade we'll mention very soon. I don't know if it's the right fit what they got, but I don't think there's room with Brunson and with Dinwiddie in the backcourt, and Luka obviously for Dragic to fit in there. So who would I like to see him on? First thing is the Celtics, because he killed the Celtics in the bubble. Like he was so tough to watch. Just cook the Celtics in the bubble.
Right. So you remember that series I was talking about? Yeah, he was amazing.
Absolutely, of course. Him and
their two bench guards were incredible. Playing definitely outperforming their 2 starting guards. I mean, that's just how they do it. That's just how they do it.
You watch them like throw them on the bottom wings of a 2-3, and they'll have like Butler, Iguodala, and then Bam in the middle, and then they'll send the 2 white dudes on the side and have them guard in the corner, kind of hide out. If it's Robinson or Harrow or Dragic, I'm like, man, they just get to cook our guards on the perimeter, and then they chill on defense, and we can't even expose them. That was tough to watch. I'll don't really know who I'd like to see him go to, who makes sense, who would be targeting. Um, but he'll be probably the most impactful buyout guy. We'll see he picked up in the next couple of months. So the Suns somehow upgraded a little bit. They added Holiday from the Wizards, I think is an underrated guard, and then they got Torrey Craig back for Jalen Smith, who struggled to get time for them. Suns got better. I'd give them a thumbs up. Is there any more else to say about it?
I mean, they don't have holes on their team. It's just ridiculous. Obviously, they got the two incredible guards who are, it's been well noted that they're incredible in the clutch. And then they got plenty of innings eaters in terms of bench guys that can just come in and play when CP feels like he only wants to score 12 points on any given night. They got guys to help him out. I'm guessing Shamit is still injured and will be for a while if they're getting so much guard depth. I'm not sure about Campaign. I haven't seen him play in a while, so probably could have done some research there, but I'm guessing their injuries are what causing them to get a little bit deeper. But I mean, I want to ask you about the sort of budding rivalry between them and the Warriors. It seems like in all likelihood, they're going to face off in the conference finals, and that'll just be a joy to watch. Two just really complete teams. You got superstars across the board on both teams. I'm not a Warriors fan. I'm going to root pretty hard for Chris Paul in that matchup, but I mean, it's going to be fun to watch if those two teams match up because they're both so deep, and the superstar play is pretty good from both sides.
Yeah, it'll be that would be a dream matchup to watch in the Western Conference Finals. Who do I think would win? I think it's going to come down to health. I think that's kind of obvious. I think the X factor is going to be Draymond Green. If he can play small ball 5 and not like Ayton struggles in it, it's one of his strengths, but if he can almost try and play Ayton off the floor in terms of just trying to outrun him, I think that's going to be the biggest X factor for the Warriors. So if he's out, the Warriors are done. But I would take, watching it the last 2 years, I would take the Suns any day. Their clutch statistics. If you give them a 5-point lead with 5 minutes to go, it's really hard to beat them. They're going to execute, and they're going to get a good shot every time down the floor. And as amazing as Steph Curry is, you can kind of just throw a big wing on him and have him face guard him. And it really kind of takes everything away from them. So I take the Suns, and I think the Suns got better. But that would be a dream matchup to watch. Absolutely. So Suns got better. And then we had before we get to my Celtics, the last couple of trades, we had a big 4-teamer. Highlights of it, Serge Ibaka to the Bucks. I'm guessing that's because they think Brook Lopez is going to be out for a while. And then really, Bagley gets out of Sacramento. Good for Bagley. Good for that dude. Clippers get some Ojale, Celtics guy, Hood. And the Kings get a bunch of random stuff like DiVincenzo, Lyles, Jackson. Is there a winner here?
Yeah, this trade went down probably an hour before the Harden trade, and got a text from a friend about how the Bucks got better, in reaction to the Sixers, biggest competition, the Bucks getting better. And I was just like, I responded like, we're really talking about Serge Ibaka when James Harden's on the table. But anyway, now looking at the details of each one, it's a lot of stuff, like you said. I think Ibaka helps them, but he's hit or miss. I don't know. I guess we'll see how he does in the playoffs. I think Dante's probably the best guy in this trade, right? Other than Serge Ibaka. Yeah. I mean, he was starting on the Bucks teams that were winning 60, 65 games. And of course he was the 5th starter on that team, but I think he's got promise. I haven't caught up with the Kings, but I'd imagine he'd start right next to Fox. So my guess is they got the best player out of everyone here. Besides that, yeah, everything else is just random stuff.
Mhm. I would agree. I think the Kings won this. I think Trey Lyles is very underrated. Um, Sneakily, I think around 38 to 40% from three as a four-man. Again, I'm very happy for Bagley that he just gets a second chance with a different roster. This is kind of it for him. I feel like if he is still getting DMPs, you can find him, in China next year or something. Um,
We're getting DNPs on Detroit. You're struggling. Just say that.
yeah, yeah, that's when it's not going well. He can't play for them. Serge Ibaka is, man. I was really excited for the Clippers when they got him, and then he like broke his back or something, and he had to play in the G League for like way too long to get back. He seems like he aged 4 or 5 years in the last year or so. So you know, for the Bucks, I'm like, okay, you got Serge Ibaka, but you really know what you're getting. Um, so kind of just a meh trade. Everyone gets like a thumbs to the side or something. Uh, yeah. So now we get to the good.
Let's get to the boys in green. Let's do it.
That's right. Brad
First,
Stevens was
I gotta ask you first. There was a period there where the losses were coming one after the other on top of each other. I was soaking it all in. I told my friend I was hate watching a Celtics podcast for like days on end. Like literally every day I'd watch you guys because it was just chaos every single day. And you guys have righted the ship. The entire time your point differential, which is, typically the best indicator of how good a team's quality is. You guys were always at a higher point differential than the Sixers, and you were like 10 games behind the Sixers. So I was like, all right, we know why. It's because the clutch performance was so terrible. But now you're, I think, sixth or seventh in point differential in the whole NBA, which, signals that you're maybe a contender. I think you're a little bit far away from that status, but clearly your point differential says otherwise. And now you're 5 or 6 games over 500. So what's the feeling around the fan base right now?
I think I've felt as good now as I have since they beat the Raptors in Game 7 in the bubble. It's been a long kind of what the hell is going on with this team. But you look at it, they have the best record of any NBA team in 2020 this calendar year. They have the number one ranked, I think, net defense in the league since then.
2022, you mean this year?
Yeah, in 2022. And the East is so tight. They're 5 games out of first. They win a couple here or there. They can find themselves 3, 4, 5. And they just got to keep it up. So they did make some moves, which is what it is. I thought their chemistry was getting really good as they've been having the success recently. I think Josh Richardson was kind of one of the boys with Tatum and Brown. You'd see videos of them like working out after like every game. They'd be getting lifts after every game. I'm like, okay, that's not stuff like teammates in the NBA do all the time. So it's honestly a little tough to see them kind of shake it up. I know that can kind of mess with some flow and some chemistry in the middle of the season. But honestly, I'm feeling pretty good as a Celtics fan, everything considered. So they were able to make 2 moves. The first and most important one was Derek White from San Antonio, which he is kind of out of my radar. He seems like someone who was solid and had some good playoff performances. San Antonio liked him, and he's going to be a good fit, I guess. But they did have to give up a lot. So they gave up Richardson, Langford, a first-round pick next year. What? Okay. And then a pick swap in the first round.
Seems like you're reading this for the first time and are getting more concerned as you read it. Yeah, they're giving up this year's first-round pick. It's protected, but I think it should convey this year, I think. So
I agree.
They have no confidence that their 14th pick will get them anything other than Aaron Neesmith and Romeo Langford again. I guess they don't want to draft anymore, which is, I guess, a fair assessment.
Yep. Derek White. This is what I got from my social media research on it. He's a defensive-minded point guard. Checks first box. He is a smart player who can run the point. Checks another box. He's going to make the right play on offense. Checks another box. I just think he does a lot of good things that could help the Celtics. So what do you think about this trade?
Thing is, Derek White was on the USAB team that Coach Ime coached with Marcus and Jason and Jalen. So now they have a third. They have a third. I saw a stat there that they have a third of that team again. They had a third of it when Kemba was on the team, and now they've replaced that member of the USAB team. From the coverage I've heard, he seems sort of redundant with Marcus Smart, which is not a bad thing to have. I would love to have 15 Marcus Smarts, but seems like he's sort of in that mold of definitely is not, creating for himself too efficiently, but is a really good ball mover, really good defender. I saw a tweet about how Harden's going to have to deal with 48 minutes of Derek White and Marcus Smart now or something like that. That's just a optimistic take about, how good the Celtics deal is going to be. It's already really good, obviously. I asked a few Celtics fans about, how they felt Richardson did. He obviously shot the hell out of the ball this year from three. Way better than he did last year in Dallas. This is his fourth team in, I think, 16 months. So he's been on a bunch of teams now, poor guy. And I actually got a text back saying, I don't love Richardson, but I love him because Tatum loves him, was the text I got back. So, and he mentioned the whole working out thing. So I've seen Grant Williams and I've seen other guys in that lift. So maybe it's not Richardson, not just Richardson, but
right.
I think they unquestionably got better. I mean, Derek White's a guy, he's only on his second contract. It's rare that you get an opportunity to get a player who's, could be improving still sort of young and is on either his first or second contract. And so I think they just said, hey, we could either draft a guy this year or we could just take a guy that is also improving but has already solidified himself. So that said, it's a lot to give up. I think Romeo probably his reputation had soured across the fan base, I think. So it's a lot to give up, but I think, White has the potential to stay around for a little bit and help make the two superstars' lives easier. So I think that's the goal.
Celtics also made another move in terms of getting.
He's back. He's back.
He's back.
Come on.
He already fouled out of the first game. He's got to sit. Man, it kind of gave up a lot. Schroeder. I mean, it was really just Schroeder and some junk for Tice. I'm so happy that Enes Kanter, Freedom, whatever his name is out of there. Man, he's a distraction. He's a clown. He is the worst pick and roll defender I've ever watched in my life. Schroeder, all right, he was kind of always going to get dealt. And then Tice, I like Tice, actually. I think he's versatile. I think he can shoot. I think he's smart. I think he knows how to play with the dudes on this roster already, so that'll help. And he's on a solid deal, kind of signed up. Same with White. He's on another friendly mid-level deal that has a couple years on it. So any thoughts on this return?
I know you're going to lose Schroeder at the end of the year, and I guess Tice has some more years on the contract, but I don't know. You're really going to tell me, and obviously this year, I mean, it's not a full wash. You're probably not going to compete this year, but do you really think the next 3 months of Dennis Schroeder is not worth the next 3 years of Daniel Tice? I don't know. To me, Daniel Tice makes no positive or negative impact. He's just out there. And to me, Schroeder, and obviously I haven't tuned into a bunch of the winning streak recently. I don't know how he's been doing, but I mean, he's valuable, man. So, I don't even know what they got for Schroeder. Why not just keep him and see how things play out?
It's all about fit. He he's just not a pass first point guard, organize the floor. He's like a third guard, sixth man scorer type who's gonna dominate the ball, but not really pass it. And when you have that guy bringing it up, and then he passes it to Tatum, and Tatum, ping, 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 step back. Everyone's watching. They needed more of a ball mover and someone who's gonna like get people the ball in the right spots. I think that's more Derek White and less Schroeder. So I think it's okay. Um, Schroeder was kind of always out of there. He was just kind of, put up points and raise your value so we can trade you the whole season. But, I went to a couple Celtics games and he had some 27, 30-point games. And he was fun to watch, but he was just, getting a cup of coffee in Boston. That was all it was going to be.
Yeah, seeing reports that the Lakers would obviously be interested, and obviously they would be interested because they traded for a worse point guard, and now they just want the guy they had last year back. I mean, Schroeder. Just imagine if they had Schroeder just instead of Westbrook. And take away Kuzma, all them, but just Schroeder in for Westbrook. I mean, they'd be good. So it's a damn shame. I wonder if he comes back to the Lakers. One other thing I have to say is Brad Stevens has now reacquired the two guys who have consistently played well against Joel Embiid, obviously Al Horford and now Daniel Tice. So they're going to have, I'm saying this a little bit of tongue in cheek, but they're going to have two guys to potentially go up against Embiid. I don't know if you saw Woj's tweet a little bit a while ago. The Celtics are signing Luke Cornett again. So that's going to be their third center. So yeah, they're rounding out the big man rotation. And yeah, obviously still got Rob Williams there, and he seems like a foundational piece going forward.
He absolutely is. I did not see that Cornette. Wow, how irrelevant. Yeah. I think I'm happy as a Celtics fan. I'm really looking forward to watching White. I think Tice is just 6 fouls against Embiid. I don't know if he's going to do anything. Horford, though, I think Horford is actually, kind of kryptonite to Embiid a little bit. And
he was. You'd have to imagine, given Horford's steep drop off, and I'm sure he's been fine this year, and just how much better Embiid has gotten since Horford was on the Celtics the first time around. That hopefully that doesn't affect him, but yeah, who knows?
I mean, knowing these two teams' history, will probably be matched up in the first round of playoffs. So that'll be fun to watch for sure. The last trade we'll discuss today is a shock, honestly. Porzingis is exiled from Dallas, and the whole European connection is destroyed with Luka, and he gets sent to the Wizards with a second-round pick for Dinwiddie, Bertans, two very unwanted players in Washington. Who won this trade, and who's like your favorite piece in this deal?
Yeah, Kristaps obviously had an awesome time in the bubble. He played really well during those playoffs, and that was sort of we saw the potential of Kristaps and Luka together. It's clear that his presence has soured, his presence hasn't really been wanted around Dallas. I mean, I'm curious what Luka's thought process was when he clearly signed off on this deal, considering it's that it's that second superstar, and superstars don't come around often. I don't know if Kristaps is that guy, but they certainly traded for him like he was, and they paid him like he was. I'm optimistic on Spencer Dinwiddie. He's been terrible this year, but when the Wizards actually signed him, and then they traded Russ and got all those pieces, I really like their roster. Having Dinwiddie next to Beal, I thought would be awesome. It hasn't really worked out. He's been terrible, but I mean, before this year, he was a very interesting player. I think it'll be nice next to Luka to have him there, but it doesn't really move the needle for the Mavericks, I wouldn't say. And yeah, yeah, Kristaps' career is very interesting. Not sure where it leads next. He's always got that potential to come out and have an all-star season, but as of now, he's just left with that one all-star game he ever made, and just a ton of injuries.
Yeah, it was interesting watching Spencer Dinwiddie's, the commentary surrounding him in his short term in Washington. Seemed like he came in wanting to be almost like the alpha on the team, and really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in terms of just kind of being an incompetent leader almost. And I don't know if he's the same player after his injury, which sucks because one of my favorite trainers to watch on Instagram is his trainer, and he's also like Anthony Davis's trainer. And I watched his whole like ACL recovery process on Instagram essentially, and he looked great. He looked like he was coming back early, and he was, doing a rear elevated split squat jump within like 3 months of his ACL surgery. I'm like, wow, this dude's going to come back better or something. And that has not been the case. It'll be really interesting to see his fit with not only Luka, but also Brunson. Who's going to come off the bench there? How does their finishing lineup look like? Very some questions to answer if you're a Mavericks fan. And then I think Bertans is a very interesting aspect of this trade. He is just, man, what a story. Signs a massive $100 million deal because he shot 40-something% from three one year, and man, sucks. Like, he sucked, absolutely sucked in Washington. I think getting him with Luka, getting him some European flavor in there might help him out. Man, that's a lot of money. And then Kristaps in Washington, surprising. I have no idea about that. He's having a decent year this year. I'll give him that. So,
yeah, who knows what happens with that team. I got a quick question for you. Now that we're done sort of talking through all the trades, it just stuck with me since the Harden conversation, because obviously that's what's on the forefront of my mind. Talked about the fourth and fifth years of Harden's new contract being an overpay for sure, potentially being disastrous. I'm just curious about the discussion around sort of giving a max contract versus not. So if you, in a perfect world, had Harden on the team and you said, hey, we want to give you a max contract for 3 years, and then we only want to pay you, let's say if this was possible, we'd pay you $15 or $20 million in those fourth and fifth years, right? That's sort of the argument, right? Is that like, that's too much to pay in the fourth and fifth years? So I'm just curious, like, fine, you're left with 20 extra more $1 million. Like, if Harden is not at that level, it doesn't, those 20 million don't matter because your team's going to stink, I guess, is my point. Now, having the 5 years on the books, I guess, gives you less flexibility, but I don't understand. Is he easier to move if he's on a smaller contract? I just don't understand, like, the whole, you have to max out this really good player and the fourth and fifth years are going to get ugly. Like, yeah, but what else are you doing with the money in the fourth and fifth years? Like, this guy is the reason. Like, I don't get that line of thinking. So I'm curious what you think about that.
I don't think giving him a declining contract is even possible.
It's not. Let's just assume it in this hypothetical. If you could do that, what would you do with the extra 20 million is my point.
I mean, surround him with some better talent, get him some depth, some wing shooting or something that'll help him out too as he, severely ages. Because if you look at his stats, man, he's already on the decline of his career.
For sure.
His minutes are down. His field goal percentage is down. Everything is down from his MVP years. His scoring is way down, way down. 22 versus 1 year he averaged 36 a game. You know,
I'm not denying his declining value. I'm just saying from a cap perspective, from a contract perspective, if Russell Westbrook was making 30 and not 45, sure, I guess the Lakers would have some more flexibility to go out and sign guys. But is that $20 million going to affect the Lakers team when they're still paying a guy who's that bad $30 million? I just either he's worth it because he's a superstar or he's not. And so, yeah, I don't. I guess that's my concern. Like the extra $20 million, sure, maybe it gives you some flexibility here and there, but if that guy is not that guy, you don't win championships with role players, or you need those guys to be elite. So that was my thing.
That's where I think that's where you're, if you're a GM and you have your business meeting with all the relevant people that would make a decision on signing him to this, you have your cap guy in there saying, how can we minimize the hit and risk that we might face in year 4 and 5? And maybe it's a 3+2 deal where it's a team option or a player option on those last years to say, hey man, you averaged 19, 10, and 7 and shot 29% from 3 this year. Like, we can't pay you $50 million next year when you're 38. Like, you're gonna single-handedly tank our team because we can't find anything else. We have no flexibility in terms of those mid-level contracts that make you flexible in the middle of the season to make a deal. You see with the Lakers, man, anyone who signs a mid-level deal, they're immediately like, play well, you're on the trading block. Kuzma, THT, Caruso, KCP, all those guys were those mid-level guys, which if you give Harden at 50 in year 4, you can't have any of those mid-level guys. Your minimums, him and Embiid, really, that's it. Maybe a Tyrese Maxey at 15 million a year, who is that dude who's getting dangled in trade offers. Harden's underperforming, but you can't get rid of him because he's making
for sure
$50 million.
No, I get in terms of not having tradable contracts. I guess my point is, if he's not worth that 50 million and he's clearly not that player, then the team's not competing for a championship. And if he was making 30, there's still no way to make that team compete for a championship in terms of like that varying. So if you want to cut the contract in half, and only give him 2 or 3 years, totally makes sense. But the aspect it would never happen. I'm saying, in a general manager's mind, perfect scenario, you'd give these guys that are getting 5 years, you'd only give them 2 or 3. But the difference between 30 and 50 to me in that final year doesn't really make a difference in terms of the cap's going up, it's inflated, whatnot. And if that guy's not worth that money, your team, it just can't compete, I guess is my point. So the extra year, the extra million, they have to give it to these players because, their feathers are going to be ruffled if not. And so I totally get that aspect. But yeah, I guess there's the whole way of saying is I couldn't care less about the 4th and 5th years. And if you want to talk to me then, and it's an albatross and it's a terrible contract, sure. And then I'll ask you what happened the previous 3 years, and then I'll let you know if it was worth it, I guess.
That's very fair. It's going to be super interesting to watch. If you look back at James Harden's career and you make a documentary on him, you're just going to find disappointment at the end of every single season. And the disappointment, I don't even know if it's felt by James Harden himself. It's felt by their fan base. He seems like he doesn't really care as much as we want your superstar to care. And I think that's the biggest thing you can ask for. Giannis, LeBron, Luka, Jokic, Steph, KD, Kawhi, they care a lot. Harden, just watching the All-Star draft last night with Kevin Durant, LeBron James, don't know if you've seen that, but
Kevin was not a happy camper, let's say. And although James was taking his lumps, I mean, I think you look at Kevin the same way. And although it was not Kevin's fault, Kevin lost his running mate. And so I think both guys in that marriage didn't come out of it looking good. I would say of course, Harden came out of it looking terrible. I'm not going to deny that. But Kevin sitting there being all glum and bum. He's got two superstars next to him who refuse to play. I think LeBron's happy KD is not in a great spot right now. I'll also say that.
And I don't even think it's on KD. I think it's the polygamous relationship and the other guy that's involved that kind of got Harden to want to get out of there.
Yep.
And then KD
sorry, keep going about your Harden situation.
A lot of the times, if watching that All-Star draft gives you so much vision into who is actually respected in the league. Who do dudes actually think is legit and not? It's
for sure.
They're pure honesty.
You know who KD's first pick was?
Embiid.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that was the situation. Out of the 5 superstars on those 2 teams, there's 2 of them who have respect for each other. The other 3 are outcasts, and I thought that was just. I mean, those 2 have a lot of respect for each other. Clearly, I mean, it's clear, and so the 3 guys around them are going to make or break those 2 teams, and it's going to be fascinating. But yeah, like you said, the draft is you see who values who. To your point, Harden has gone much higher in previous years. This was a very interesting year. LeBron left him for a specific reason because he wanted to make headlines, and he did that, and I love him for that. But I don't think you can blame this draft. I don't think you can blame his place in this draft on his. I don't know. It was obviously a unique situation last night. So yeah.
Rudy Gobert is one of the most disliked superstars in the entire league, and Kevin Durant. There's 2 players left. He goes on this. Ernie and Shaq and Chuck and Kenny. They're all egging KD. Oh, you need a big man, don't you? Telling him, like, we know you don't want to pick hard. Don't do it. And KD goes on this thing saying, oh, I want all these important qualities in something that's the opposite of Kevin Durant. He's like, I want defensive intensity. Harden. And I want defensive intensity, and I want someone to care off the ball and all this stuff. And I think he was sick of Kevin Durant. He was sick of Harden too. Because off ball, if he doesn't have the ball in his hand anywhere on the court, I think he's a negative. So it'll be fun to watch. I'll be looking forward to watching any Sixers game in the future. With that being said, is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap this up?
No, I think that's it. I think we're gonna get Sixers Celtics, like you said. It has to happen. And I mean, what has to happen is Brooklyn, Philadelphia. But if that doesn't happen, hopefully me and you get a series together, and it should be fun. This regular season might be sort of throwaway now that Brooklyn and Philly are so revamped. But yeah, looking forward to the rest of the season. And thanks for having me on and letting me talk some BS to you about the Sixers. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, this has been NBA Talk, and I'm out.